Okay, so again, guys, we're going to talk a little bit today about the growth of presidential power. And essentially what I mean by that is, obviously the President of the United States has a ton more power than what he did in 1796 in present-day America. He has to, okay? Because the presidents now deal with a lot more things than what George Washington, John Adams, all those cats had to deal with back in their day, right? So the handout that you got from Chapter 14, Section 1, deals with a little bit of that, okay? So basically, if we look at your notes, we're going to try to explain why Article 2 of the Constitution can be described as an outline of the presidential office. We're going to talk about several reasons for why the growth of presidential power. And then we're going to explain how president's views have affected the power of his office. So before we write anything down, there is an important thing noted in the objectives here. You don't have this on your paper, so you just need to write it down somewhere on your paper. But you need to write down that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution describes the executive branch. You will see that again, okay? Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution describes the executive branch. If you look at number 1 on your handout, it says Article 2 is known as the blank because it establishes the presidency. Simply put, in that blank, the executive article. Okay? And it goes along the same lines of what we just talked about. Okay? So, Article 2 is known as the executive article because it establishes the presidency. Just to give you an idea, Article 1 talks about how Congress works, the structure there. Article 3 describes the judicial branch. Okay? So, Article 2 describes what the executive has to offer. Okay? In the second one, it says Article 2 establishes the following presidential powers. So let's get into these powers and see how they work. Okay? So, all right. So, number 2, articles that establishes the following presidential powers. The first one there, and I'm going to jot them down, but you guys can see them up there. The first one is command the armed forces. This is all number 2. These are things that Article 2 of the Constitution actually state that the president can do. So he commands the armed forces. That's letter A. All right. So they command the armed forces. And again, these are all on the board. If you get behind, the second one is to make treaties. The third one says to approve or veto acts of Congress. Basically, he approves a bill into law, or he vetoes a bill that he doesn't like. So he can approve or veto. Number 4, or letter D there, it says send and receive diplomats. That's when people come here from another country wanting to talk to us about a government from another country. So we send and receive. He has the ability to do that, diplomats. Letter E, it's not on the board, but this one is worth mentioning. He has the ability to grant pardons. You guys know what a pardon is?
It's like if somebody is like convicted of a crime, he can pardon them from going to
Yeah, he
jail.
can basically take a prison sentence away from someone if they prove saying that they didn't do it or new evidence suggests that somebody else did it. And then the last one, it says, again, the last one is on the board. It says take care that the laws are faithfully executed. So I would just put down that laws are executed. If you guys remember, the executive branch's whole purpose is to carry out laws, okay? So they have to make sure that laws are executed. So just to clarify that for you all, you're going to need to know these 6 ideas about what it's listed in the Constitution that the president can do. And there they are. They command the armed forces. He can make treaties. He can approve or veto Congress. He can send and receive diplomats. He can grant pardons. And laws are executed. Now, if you notice, it's got 6 things. In your opinion, do you think the president has the ability to do more than those things? Yes, he has a ton of things he can do. And hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about them as we move on through this. Okay? So, it says the presidency has been called the most powerful office in the world, which in my opinion I think it is. There's not a lot of offices. You know, we're one of the most free countries in the world. We're one of the most powerful countries in the world. So our leader would be one of the most powerful people in the world. All right? So, it says, what 2 views of the presidency was debated by the framers? So basically, what was the idea behind what our founding fathers thought the presidency should be? Okay? It says, executive powers are broadly defined and open to interpretation. If you guys, have any of you ever read the Constitution? Have you ever had a class that made you read it?
I've read a little bit of it.
A little bit of it. It's a very broad document, okay? And what I mean by that is it leaves open to interpretation a lot of things, okay? That's why we have debates over the Second Amendment. That's why people have debates over many things, because it's left over to a broad interpretation, okay? It says, at the Constitutional Convention, delegates argued for a weaker executive appointed by Congress. Some people just wanted someone who would basically do what Congress told them to do, okay? And then other ones argued that they supported a strong, independently elected executive. So basically, guys, here's the outlook that we had in 1787. Some people wanted a strong presidency that was separate of Congress. They felt that if they were not part of Congress, then he wouldn't feel like he had to go the same way Congress does every time. You guys make sense? Mm-hmm. That's why a Supreme Court justice, you know, they're arguing over it so much right now about President Trump's appointee. Once you get appointed to the Supreme Court, you're appointed for life. There ain't but so many ways you get out of that duties: death, resignation, or retire. You know what I mean? So that's an important deal. The reason they do that is because they don't want the Supreme Court justices feeling they obligated to vote the same way that the president would. You guys understand that? Once the Supreme Court justice is appointed and they are approved, they are free from executive control. Y'all understand that? So even if President Trump appoints a conservative justice and that justice votes more liberal on an issue, they can't get rid of him or her simply because of that, because they're free of executive control. So the ones that are arguing that they wanted a president that was free of congressional control is the same aspect. They didn't want a president that was going to be a yes man or yes woman to Congress. Y'all got me? And then the other side wanted someone that was controlled by Congress because they thought of him as being a king. If you guys remember, we broke away from England because we didn't like the way the king treated us, right? So you're split here. So if you look at number 3 on your paper, it says, beginning at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, there has been a struggle between those who wanted a blank and those who wanted a blank. So basically, we're going to put down there was a struggle between those who wanted a strong presidency and those who wanted a weak presidency. And you can put them either way. So there's a conflict between a strong and a weak president. Now, in your opinion, which one did we end up with? Did we get a strong or did we get a weak president?
Strong.
I feel like we got a stronger one. You know, obviously they're not obligated to Congress for any means. Congress has to approve a lot of the things that the president does, but he doesn't have to bow down to them, so to speak, right? So, yeah, I would feel like we have a pretty strong presidency, okay? So, it says presidential power has grown over time, and why has this happened? So if you look, it says why presidential power has grown, and you got number 4 through number 7 listed there, okay? It says, compared to Congress, the executive branch is a unified office with one leader capable of quicker decisions. As the role of the federal government has grown and the country has endured wars and other major crises, Citizens have looked to the presidency for decisive leadership. And that makes sense, guys. Any of you seen the pictures of 9/11? You see President Bush standing there at ground zero. You know, a lot of things in history, you see a president there capable of trying to help out. So, number 4 suggests, it says, throughout American history, those who want a blank have usually prevailed. Now, you just answered that question. The people that wanted a strong or weak presidency have prevailed. Which one do we have? Y'all just answered it. Strong or weak?
Strong.
We have a strong one. So number 4, put down a strong presidency. Okay?
Ain't seen you around here lately, Bobo.
All right. So, number 5 says, one reason for the growth of presidential power has been the nation's increasingly complex what? So let's talk a little bit about what that is referring to. Okay? So, growth of power. It says certain presidents have used the influence of their office to increase the scope of presidential power. It says Congress has delegated authority to the executive branch to carry out the many laws passed by them. Okay, common sense. We'll get to that here in a few seconds. It says the size of the staff supporting the president has grown, allowing involvement in most areas of government. So obviously his staff, the people around him. You guys, when we were talking about the presidential succession, George Washington had 2 members of his cabinet, Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury, right? Donald Trump has 18 of those now. Okay, so obviously his staff has grown 9 times bigger than what it was originally. Okay? Says the president has a unique ability to use the media, such as radio, television, and the internet, to attract public attention to their policies and goals. Now let's stop right there a second. If you look at number 10, at the very bottom where it says mass media, y'all see what I'm talking about there? We have a definition. It says the mass media, I want you to write down that it's a means of communicating with the people. This is number 10. It's a means of communicating with the people. Do you think President Trump has more means of communicating with the people than, say, I don't know, Thomas Jefferson did? Yeah. There's so many more ways to communicate now than what there were prior that other presidents had to deal with. So, let's go up to number 5. Number 5, it really doesn't directly mention it in your notes, but we will talk about it. It says one reason for the growth of presidential power has been the nation's increasingly complex. We're going to put down social and economic life there. Social and economic life. And this is number 5. Social and economic life. Do you think people have more responsibility now than people did 150 years ago? Not different responsibility. We still have the same responsibility. We just have more of it, right? As far as our social lives go, we have a better way of, communicating with people than what people did back early in presidential times. So, the point of views. There's millions of different point of views now than what there were in earlier presidential life. So the complexities of our social and economic life have led to the growth in presidential power. Okay, for example, you take any type of movement we've had recently, like Black Lives Matter. George Washington wouldn't have had to deal with anything like that. Abraham Lincoln somewhat did, with the Emancipation Proclamation, but, they weren't dealing with police brutality and, things that just pop up because of our social diversity, right? So obviously presidents gain more power simply because of the things that we're dealing with, all right? Number 6 says, the frequent need for what has also strengthened presidential power. Now that was kind of answered up here, okay? If I can find it again. Okay. What this means is when something happens or something goes wrong, the citizens look to our government, and more specifically look to the president for an answer. Doesn't necessarily have to be the right answer. Don't have to be the wrong answer. They just look for him for an answer. You guys understand that? I know you all don't remember this, but when 9/11 happened, once everybody had realized what had happened, and Coach D even can attest to this, America just wanted to go fight somebody. We didn't really know who we were wanting to go fight. We just knew that somebody was responsible for it, and somebody needed to pay for it, right? So the president, what's he got to do? They have to figure out who is responsible for that sort of thing, right? Once we figure it out, what's all of America calling for? They want to go take care of this situation, right? And he's very quick to the point. This is what we're going to do. Anybody harboring anybody that's a terrorist, they will be considered a terrorist and will be treated as a terrorist, right? Very quick, to the point, decisive action. Make a point. Stay with it, right? So, number 6, the frequent need for, put down decisive action. And here's how you spell decisive. You can actually put leadership if you want to. Decisive leadership has also strengthened the presidential power. Sometimes a decision has to be made really quickly, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. So they need decisive leadership. So far, so good with this. Is this making sense? You guys good with here so far? All right. Number 7 says, even blank has strengthened the presidency by passing laws that added to the activities of the executive branch. That should be easy. Who passes laws? What branch gets to pass laws?
Judicial.
No.
Legislative.
Legislative. Who's in it?
Who's in legislative?
Yes.
The legislature.
The Congress, right?
Congress.
So number 7, even Congress has made the presidential have more strength simply because of what they're doing. All right. Now, this next couple of pages, this isn't in your paper that you actually have to write notes down on. But I do want to bring it up. We're talking about the growth of presidential power and how much strength that office has. Can that office do anything it wants to do? Can the president just go and say, hey, I'm going to do this today, and it work? No, he can't. He has limitations on things he can do. And we've kind of alluded to those. The president can send troops to anywhere he wants to today, right? But they can't act in a military fashion until who approves it? Congress, right? So there are some things he's got to do. So basically what this is talking about is the limit on power. And it just gives you an example of a president, Harry Truman. He tried to take over the steel mills during the Korean War, tried to help produce things for our military, and the Supreme Court didn't allow him to do that. But like, you can't just go in and take over because you're the president. That's not how it works. Okay, so that was a significant ruling, because if they hadn't have done that, I'm sure other presidents would have tried to take over other things. Okay, so they wouldn't just let them. You can't just do whatever you want to do because you're the president. Okay, so if we move down to number 8 and number 9, it's talking about the presidential view. In number 8, it says, some strong, effective presidents have stated that the blank theory, which takes a broad view of their powers. I want you to write down the word stewardship there, but then we're going to add some stuff to this. Right here it is, the stewardship theory. Okay? It states that a president should try to do whatever would help the public, using whatever powers could be claimed. Okay? So basically the president's, in this particular case, Teddy Roosevelt, suggested that the president should use this theory, which says that they can do anything in their power by any means necessary to help the public in a time of crisis. Okay? They call it the stewardship theory. So I would like for you to write down what that is. Okay? And it says that the president should try to do whatever to help the public with whatever powers could be claimed. I don't know how to shorten that for you, but you need to put that somewhere because I will ask you what the stewardship theory means or does. All right?
President what now?
It's a theory that should suggest that the president should try to do whatever he can to help the public using whatever power that could be claimed.
With whatever what?
Power that can be claimed. So basically he's suggesting that the president should go to basically the end of his line, so to speak, to try to use whatever power necessary to help out the public. Okay? And then number 9 says, critics of a strong presidential power compare the president to an emperor, calling the president, and this is up here in your notes early. Some people think that the president has gained too much power and suggest that he is kind of like an emperor. They call that an imperial presidency. Okay? That's the answer to number 9, but we're also going to define it. Okay? So beside of imperial presidency, put down that it's a critical view. So it's actually kind of hurting the presidential name, office, however you want to put it. It's a critical view that suggests the president has become too powerful. All right? An imperial presidency is a critical view suggesting that the president has become too powerful. Now, does anybody have any questions as far as the first section here? I know you've had this since Friday, but now obviously we need to go over it. Okay? So, and then again, here's your imperial presidency. It's at the bottom. It says it gained too much power. So, that's basically it for section 1. Does anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to send you the little 10-question quiz thing that we normally do.